Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy Nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, and thanks so much for joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. I'm Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and today I have the great honor of having both of the folks from the We're Not Fine podcast joining me, fellow podcasters. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and tell us who you are and why you do what you do.
Thank you for having us, Jennifer. My name is Doug Jensen. I'm a psychotherapist based in the Twin Cities. I've been in practice for over 28 years. I work a lot with relationships. As a gay identified therapist, I do a lot of LGBTQ work. I do a lot of trauma work. And so I see a lot of unique things in my practice. But this podcast, We're Not Fine, which of course, my beautiful and lovely friend and colleague Talia does with me. We really want to open up the dialogue about relationships of all kind. And, you know, one of the things that we really love talking with people like yourself about is all the ways that even finances are a part of our relationship. So we started this podcast, honestly, to just reach those people who might otherwise not have access to mental health support or advice support. And we encourage everyone to contact us regarding all those things.
That's right. And I'm Dr. Talia Jackson, also Twin Cities psychologist in private practice. And Doug hired me as an intern 20 years ago, and we've been really good buddies ever since. And loving doing this podcast together, and also adults, couples, and we're just obsessed with human psychology and relationships and wanting to help guide people to live their most beautiful, authentic lives.
So I had the pleasure of being on your podcast as well and talking through the psychologies of truly everything, right? Everything has a psychological kind of background behind it.
It does.
How did you both get on this path? I mean, were you little and you're like, hey, this is what I want to do? Or how did you end up being where you're at now?
You know, I have a not so great answer to that in some ways. So,
Honest.
This is going to turn sad and tragic in a different sort of way, I think. So I grew up in a household where there was some abuse. My mother in particular had some mental health issues. And so I think from a very early age, I'll be honest, you know, I learned to scan for safety. I learned to scan people's faces. I learned to scan if my mother was in an okay mood or if I needed to hide or whatever it was. So I will tell you, I think my psychotherapeutic skills, Jennifer, regretfully came from needing to survive, right?
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't necessarily thriving. So I find myself, even with people, and it's everyone, I found myself early on in my life kind of scanning people, assessing people, understanding people. And I am hopeful that I've been able to turn that into something that helps other people by recognizing. And I think one of the things that I had a client recently say when they were in my office that my eyes kind of sear through them. Because when I'm assessing someone in particular, I look at them really, really intensely. And I look at them in a way that I'm just really reading everything about their nonverbals, their body movements, their eye movements, their face to get to know who they are. And I don't know what that looks like on the other side. I should film it sometime because that searing, you know, whatever that X-Men was that had those searing eyes, if he took off his sunglasses. Cyclops, was it? No, it wasn't that. It was something else. I don't even know who it was.
But I know who played him.
I know.
James Marsden.
Yeah.
With the X-ray.
Yeah, he would take off his eyes and then beams would come out.
I imagine you do it in a kind way, though, right? Like you're a kind soul with searing eyes.
I hope so. Although, you know,
searing.
I will say that people are like, God, I feel like you're looking right through me. And I'm like, I'm trying, right? I want to see everything because I think that's how growth happens. Like, I really want to know those people. And so I got into this world, and it's funny in retrospect because when I was, I think 15, my high school guidance counselor pulled me aside and said, you've been identified by your classmates as someone that people want to talk to. So he sent me to a peer counseling program called PIP, Partners in Prevention. I went to a camp for the couple weeks, and I remember everyone in my group called me kind of the dad. Like I was the person who felt safe and comforting to people. And I resisted it. I resisted this world of psychology. I went pre-law. I was like, I'm going to be an attorney and I'm going to help people who are unjustly, crucified by the court system become free. That didn't last long. No offense to attorneys. I was in my second year of the pre-law program and I walked up to the professor and I said, I hate these people. I'm going, I do not want to live my life with these people. I know there's great attorneys. Please, nobody be offended. I love mine. I love my personal attorney. But, that was part of it. I finally succumbed. I'm like, why don't you just fucking do what is natural and normal for you and go into mental health? And so that's kind of my journey. So it kind of started, I think, and I look back, I think there were a lot of signs that I was really learning how to cope in this world by reading people and scanning people for safety, for love, I will tell you at this point in my life, I have an amazing amount of ride or die friends who would, do anything for me and vice versa. So I have learned to kind of find those people that work for me, but also hopefully in my office, I'm able to read people and help them get through. And I've been told many, many times that I'm much more directive and much more intense than any therapy people have had before. I have a beautiful psychiatrist in my building who jokes with people. He's like, if you want someone to go, that must be hard, go somewhere else. If you want to get better, go see Doug. So I'm very flattered by his endorsement.
The nicest thing anyone could think.
It is pretty nice. I agree with that. Right.
I would say some similarities and some differences there too. But I have a mom who is beautiful, fantastic, and also born from the Holocaust and has a lot of trauma, and there was a lot of scarcity. And she's overcompensating for never having been parented, right? And so when I was an only child in a really enmeshed relationship, and there were no witnesses. And so I remember always feeling like, am I crazy or is she crazy? Like, is this normal? Is this not normal? Because and she was literally doing the best she could do, and her heart is gold and the best of intentions. But it would be a lot of this sort of like, no, that's not right. That's not what happened. That's not how you feel. What you're feeling is the wrong reaction to what I just said. You're being sensitive. I'm just being honest, or, whatever it was. And so I remember, and my parents were divorced, and my dad was so lovely and wonderful in his own way too, but there were no witnesses to just this really intense relationship. And I remember wanting to be able to understand why humans are the way that they are and what is healthy and what isn't healthy. And then fast forward to, I accidentally meet this really fantastic, healthy guy. And he was doing this .com. We moved to San Francisco. He's like a techie, big opportunities out there in 2000, 1999, whenever that was. And I remember I moved out there. He had his whole career set out for him. I graduated from college and I had a degree in anthropology. And I was like, what in the bleep am I supposed to do? With this degree, I do not want to live in Papua New Guinea. I think I've made a horrible mistake. I've got no skills. And so I remember I was doing a lot of this co-teaching stuff, making no money, exhausted, working so much and not finding it particularly fulfilling. And then I just got this book called, do you guys remember What Color is Your Parachute?
Oh, I do.
Yes.
I still advise people to read it. Yep.
And there was still nothing. I was like, think I want to ever work. And I was like, and I told my now husband, but I told Rob, and I was like, what happens if the only skill I have is having juicy conversations with my friends about life and drinking coffee? It's like, there's nothing else I know how to do.
Then you do a podcast.
Basically, that it was born from I think that's what I want to do. Oh my God, that's a job. And I can root for people and I can guide them and I can help them and I can be a witness. And everybody needs that. So anyway, it's the most fulfilling, meaningful career.
That's fantastic. You guys both have just beautiful stories of how you've evolved to where you're at. And how did the podcast evolve from there then as well?
Doug?
Yeah, I could talk about this. So I would say about 12 years ago, 12 years ago, I would say. I was approached by this dude who, I don't know how he knew who I was, but he's like, your charisma and your personality and your appearance are perfect for TV. I want you to meet with this producer from LA. Be the next Dr. Phil. I got all kinds of things to say about Dr. Phil, but I'll keep those private. But the reality of it, he was like, I need you to do this. So this producer came 12 years ago or so to the Twin Cities, filmed me in this restaurant. I remember being kind of struck by, like, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. I asked what their image was. And I'm going to be honest with everyone listening to this. They were drawing pictures of me on the table that we were at on the paper. And they were shirtless and they were on cups and mugs. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they said, oh, you're going to be the sexy version. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not, because I am a professional. And I think I needed to be taken for granted, taken seriously about what I do, because I take what I have very seriously in terms of my skills and my profession. So I was flattered by the opportunity. He took the film, and I don't know even what he did with it. But it was kind of concerning. Like, I'm going to also share a really dirty part of LA, and you've been in TV, I know, so you might understand some of this. My older daughter's in Hollywood. I said, am I what you're looking for? He looked under the table at me and to determine how I looked underneath as well. And I'm like, I am so disgusted by this whole process. And I felt very objectified. So I kind of said, not a chance.
That was a hard stop.
It was a hard stop. I also had a very young child at the time. And I thought, this is not going to be how I'm going to raise my child. So I don't want them to see their dad that way.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't love it. So
that's a casting couch story if I've heard one, right?
I'm telling you. So with that, then, the next time, the same person, not the same person who did the kind of dirty part of that, another person who was involved in that, who initially saw me as having some potential, approached me for a podcast about a year and a half ago. Very grateful for him kind of initiating this and seeing some potential in me. We kind of decided at some point I needed a co-host, and I said, I know who it is. Asked my dear friend here, Talia, who said, nope. No, I sweat a lot. My whiskers.
What I said was, every time there's a camera on me, I get a sweat mustache, but I'm not your girl. I'm a one-on-one in a room with my coffee, working, like rolling up my sleeves, but I do not do cameras and audiences and any of that.
And now by the time this is over, she'll be singing and dancing for everybody on camera because she's so comfortable. So I was kind of obstinate. I'm like, you're the person I need for this.
And I'm so grateful because it's sort of a lesson in sometimes you have to grow. This is what growing feels like. You got to push yourself out of your comfort zone and do the things that seem really overwhelming because now I'm unstoppable. I like talk over him.
Has anyone noticed already? So yes, we start this process. Her husband was very instrumental. Rob, thank you so much. Instrumental in convincing her, you need to try this. Like, this is an opportunity, right? So we started doing it, and you may have felt this too. I know your podcast is not that old, and you have some experience prior to this probably that helped you, but boy, were we green. We were so nervous about disclosure as therapists. Like, how much do we want people to really know about us? Which is kind of like out of the bag at this point. Like, you start disclosing things like I just did about how I entered this profession, which is very personal. So my clients now know things about me that they may not have known otherwise. And, there have been clients that have had to process what they've learned about me so that they can remain, the therapeutic alliance and relationship can continue. But it was awkward initially. I mean, we were just like aware of the camera and we were aware of the microphones, and I wasn't talking in the microphone enough. And I was getting yelled at by the guy who was, producing it at the time. And I'm like, I am not putting the mic. We call it microphone gate. I threw my microphone across the room and I said, I'm done. And I walked out.
He had a tantrum.
I did. I had a dysregulated emotional tantrum. So, but this has been an amazing process. And I will tell you, the thing that really keeps me going, Jennifer, is that, we're getting this feedback from people that is so heartwarming about the meaning of this every week coming out for them and having it be their Tuesday morning ritual now while they go on walks or while they're at the gym or on their way to work. Like, it's become a ritual for people. And I'm incredibly grateful to our audience.
So we're all about relationships.
Yeah.
We're taking every topic under the sun about relationships of all kinds and different issues that come up for people, different ways of being in relationships, advice. And we take fantastic, just like messages from our listeners. If you go to we'renotfine.com, you can send us all sorts of questions.
There's the plug.
Love them. There's a plug.
And we will definitely have that information in the show notes as well.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think with your podcast, super interesting because I was on it and it was
Yes, you
awesome.
were.
Good.
But not
Love.
being biased about that. But that being said, I mean, there's a psychology, like I said, behind everything. And I think sometimes when we look at different aspects of life, you don't realize there is a psychology behind it. And I definitely, that's something we share here on this podcast is, money memories, financial infidelity. So segueing into money memories, what's a money memory that you would each like to share, or a few, just that really helped mold your relationship to money as an adult?
You want to start?
Sure.
Go ahead.
One thing that comes to mind is this experience of, it's sort of twofold. So I went to this amazing private school as one of the very few scholarship kids. My dad was a professor. My mom was an immigrant. We didn't have any money. We went, and my dad did this like professorial exchange in Europe. So we lived in a couple of different, like when I was 4 years old, we lived in Poland, we lived in Austria. And then when we came back and I was going into kindergarten, it just so happened that we had no money, but I spoke 4 languages pretty fluently. I can barely speak English now. I don't speak those languages anymore. They're gone. I do still speak Hebrew. My mom is Israeli, but I just remember I got in because of the languages and because both of my parents were teachers and professors and they were in academia. And it was such a gift to be surrounded by these brilliant people who valued education. However, I became so aware of how very different our family was than all the families that we went to school with, and the cars and the clothes and the travel and then juxtaposition that with, my parents were also getting a divorce and they each lived in 1-bedroom apartments and I slept on a fold out couch in each different house, which honestly didn't even notice. It was fine. I felt like I was in the heart of the home and my parents both loved me so much. I never felt unloved. But I definitely would notice that when I would need something or ask for something, or if my clothes were getting too small, or if we would, go out to eat and it was this extraordinarily special thing, but it was also fraught with this feeling of like, well, I shouldn't, and I shouldn't ask, and I can't, and I already know the answer, and I'll just make do with what I have. And this idea of like, yes, you can have the main meal, of course, but you have to choose between a drink, like a soda, or a dessert, and only rich people get appetizers. Like, I just remember this feeling of just like, I understand. And I also feel like a part of my identity is somebody who like, oh yeah, we're not materialistic. We're not into money. So I'm superior morally because I'm surrounded by all of these people with tons of money, but we have love or we have integrity and all of this narrative that comes around that then, fast forward into like, my husband and I come from not much and we're kind of rocking it. And we both love our professions and we're really proud of ourselves. And we're providing this stability for our kids too, in a way that we never had. And so it's been a really challenging narrative to shift about like, uh-oh, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Am I one of these gross people that I judged?
And to talk through that, I mean, that's a huge realization, getting that from childhood and realizing that was your money memory. But how have you kind of helped evolve that and change the narrative for yourself and for your family?
Well, it's kind of funny and also embarrassing, right? And so like do you know who did it for me? Oprah. It- she just makes this like, oh, I love Oprah. And I was like, she's a good person. She's got a lot of money. And the way that she thinks about money is that she is a steward of resources. And I was like, that doesn't feel gross to me. And so the way that I have made sense of all of this luck and privilege and whatever it is to myself to not feel gross about it is with this financial comfort, there comes a great responsibility of generosity and guidance and helping. And so the more money I make, I just feel like I'm going to give it all away. And I mean, not like maybe literally, you guys don't get like too excited, but just like this idea of and Doug, oh my God, get ready to see him wince and roll his eyes. But this like abundance mentality, I think it's so much when I say that, around all resources that like I can be doing well. I can be really generous. I can be kind, and I can volunteer, and I can find really beautiful causes. I can help every person that I meet in any capacity that I have to help them. And that makes me feel like I can still be a really good person. And in fact, I can be good and generous.
Oh, I love that. That was beautifully said.
Yeah.
A la Oprah.
Yeah.
I love her.
You know, what's interesting when you asked that question, Jennifer, about, our money memory and whatnot, I can't even tell you how complicated mine is. I think, I can think of like, as even we had you on our podcast, it triggered a number of the memories that I do know about and I processed a bit, but it's amazing that, I don't think some of these things ever go away. So I grew up in a farm community. We did not always have a lot of money. I remember sitting on our stairway hungry and there was not food to eat. Because of some mental health issues from my mother, she would like hoard food and then not let us eat it as kids. I had two sisters. And so it would go bad. And then we would be like without those plums, or we were without the, the food that, we hoped to have eaten. And I was, as a growing person who was a working little boy on the farm, my chores, I was so hungry all the time. And so I just wasn't eating. And I did not know. I mean, I really didn't know who was different than that because that's what I had. And so I was hungry a lot. I remember starting to date who is now my ex-wife, who I love dearly. We still co-parent beautifully together after my coming out. But I think there's a part of this where, I remember the first time she took me to a fancy department store and bought me this sweater. I can tell you it was red and blue. And I will never forget it. And I am almost maybe teary talking about it because I remember saying, I can't have that sweater. Like, I can't be that person that wears that sweater it was Dayton's. I felt really guilty about it. I didn't feel like it was right for me because, it was expensive in those terms at that point. Then I got to college and my roommate, who is still my best friend, had a lot of money in his family. And I remember he gave me 4 Ralph Lauren polo shirts for Christmas, and I unwrapped them and I just felt like I couldn't wear them because what if I wear them and then they wear out and then I don't have anything nice? So I watched other people kind of get comfortable. He showed up in his Camaro Z28 that he got for Christmas. And, we kind of laugh at it now, and I can laugh at it with a little bit of sorrow. But, I remember the first Christmas he called me on the phone. He's like, what did you get for Christmas? And I said, I got a kid's broom to wipe off the snow from my car. And he said, what else? And I said, oh, that was it. I got a kid's broom, which was probably $1.99, right? And I'm not blaming my parents. They did probably in some ways what they could afford and what was right for them. But he started elaborating on everything he got and cash and, all these things. And I remember thinking, and it's really sad to look back, but I remember thinking, I want that life. I want the life that these people have that have nice cars and nice things and they travel around the world. And my friend Darren's parents paid for a lot of my trips with him because I couldn't afford to go on my own. They furnished our apartment. I mean, I don't even know how much rent I actually paid during that time because I think his parents paid mine. So I'm really grateful for all those people who helped me, my ex-wife as well and her family. I had friends, I had everybody kind of rallying around me, but I was the poor kid. I did not have resources. But I think the unfortunate part might be that now I work and I work and I work and I work and I can't stop working because I love working. I love my job. I'm incredibly grateful. But as Talia sometimes will say, can you reduce your caseload so you can focus on the podcast a bit? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But, I sent my kids to NYU and USC and fashion school. And I'm grateful that they can both live in really beautiful cities and really, really beautiful apartments. And I try to never, ever forget my privilege in being able to do this. And I'm an incredible grateful person for my career and whatnot. But the layers of this go on and on. I mentioned on a previous episode that you did with us that I hoard food. I did not have food growing up, and I did everything I could to make sure my kids had no starvation, no hunger. I made sure there were 20 things for them to eat so that if they were ever hungry, they could take their choice of it. And it was my daughter who went to NYU who came back one time and said, I don't think we need 30 condiments. I think it's just like overdoing it. I'm like, but the freezer's full. And then I think I can never eat all that food, but I do that to compensate for feeling that really sense of starvation and hunger and less than. So it's not great. Like I might always, I own that I might always struggle with it as well. Those memories are very near and dear to me, but I have overbought. I have so many shoes in my in my closet that are, from Saks Fifth Avenue or Neiman Marcus. And I'm really grateful, but I did that to prove a point. But now I'm able to say, I don't need them. I have enough. And it's been nice not to buy new things for a while. So long answer to a short question.
No, thank you for being raw and vulnerable with that. And as I shared with you, I resonate with your story as well for the food side of things. Just my grandparents were Depression kids, and we had, cabinets of canned corn and beans and everything else. And I'll share it again. Like that was always kind of not the running joke in our household. It kind of is now a little bit, but like they had bloated canned corn. And I'm like, guys, you're going to go out. If you're going to go out for whatever reason, it's not going to be because you ate a bloated can of corn from 1972. So, or whenever it was from, but decades, right? For sure. So I remember replacing those.
Right.
Serious. Yeah. I remember replacing them for them. And they were so mad at me in that moment because for them, it was food and getting food on the table. And that was their number one priority. So I feel you. I feel you on that story so much. And thank you again for being open to sharing.
You're so welcome. Thank you for sharing yours as well.
And a little psychological anecdote that I just want to put out there. And I know that has nothing to do with money really, but even just the symbolism of somebody who comes from nothing and incredible scarcity. There are two options, right? Then you either grow up and you're like, mine, it's mine. No one helped me. I'm going to keep everything that I've made to myself. Yeah. And it's just such a testament to you doing your work and you knowing intuitively what was love and what was health to be able to pay it forward and give your kids what you needed and never got.
I always wonder though, do they see it that way? Or do they see I don't need that amount of whatever it is, right? I do know I overcompensate, but I am trying to pay it forward, and hopefully my kids balance out a little bit and don't have to overspend to overcompensate for not having.
They'll have their own issues.
They will have
those.
They will for sure. And when they're dead, of course they will.
And you always want what's better for your kids, right? So you always want what's better for them. But I find myself thinking, so I have a stepdaughter. We tease she's my mini-me. She's 13 now, and she was 3 when I came in her life. But I wonder how I've impacted, my money memory has rolled to her and what that's going to look like for her when it's time for her to really think through what her money memory is.
Yeah. Jennifer, I love that you're asking yourself that question. And, I will tell you, I don't think we always know. I always tell people, we can't really know. Like you said, my kids will have their own issues. They do. And they're adult enough now to tell me Dad, you're too much or whatever it is you are. And they're able to kind of communicate with me. And I've hopefully encouraged that honest, open communication. But Jennifer, we don't know. We don't always know how we're impacting our kids until we see it. And ideally, we open up those dialogues with our kids to be able to tell us what went well, what didn't go well. I always tell people when their kids are 18, ask them a question before they go to college. What did not go well for you in your childhood? Let's nip it in the bud so you can go out into adulthood as free as you possibly can be.
I even say ask that sooner than when they leave for college. If you could think about it.
And then ask 10 years later
and be like, don't blame me.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great advice. And hopefully, again, we want what's better for them than what we experienced ourselves. So it's that lifting behind the scenes each generation.
Yeah, we certainly do.
One thing that really struck me that both of you were saying I think about the pendulum kind of swinging that we grew up with our money memories and how that affected us. But the two of us, and I don't know about you, Jennifer, but it sounds like there's a lot of compensating and maybe even overcompensating. And so whereas I grew up with this feeling of scarcity, I feel like my boys, I've got a 13 and a 15-year-old, like I don't know how to instill in them maybe the same horror, fear, which also it's like terrible. I don't want them to feel that feeling. However, how do you, when you're doing okay, how do you get your kids to value the meaning of like $1 and not blow it all on DoorDash and like shoes?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question right there. I feel like for us, and we don't have it figured out by any means, but I feel like for us, like when I have client events or things that are going on, she works and she gets a stipend, right, for working during that time. And really instilling her like to save for retirement at a young age, right? So funny story. It's a little bit of a sidebar story, but she was in was she in kindergarten or first grade? I think it was kindergarten, maybe even preschool. She was little, and she had said, there's this boy at school and I think he's really cute. I think his name was like Jermaine or something. And she's like, he's really cute. She's like, but he doesn't have a 401k. She's like, so she's like 4, maybe 5, maybe. So I'm like, okay, so some seeds are good that we're planting, but maybe a little young.
That's fantastic. I know.
She already knows it can't possibly be compatible.
Well, and she's like, and I don't have one either. So she was very honest with herself. She's like, well, I don't have one either. So
I can't judge. Maybe I'll give him a shot. It's interesting because what you're talking about, though, is having those honest conversations and even starting the conversation, just really leaving it, as I said before, if you can leave it open and our kids, that they can talk to us about anything. I do struggle a little bit still. My younger moved to Chicago and was not yet in the fashion world and not yet able to pay for their own stuff. And we have battled a little bit because I don't want them living in an area that's not as safe. And so I pay a little bit more for the apartment and they're struggling with me paying for it. But I'm like, well, I can't do it any other way. Like I have to sleep at night about where you live. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's this balance. But I think one of the pieces, and I really want to say, and you've talked about this in terms of your own private education experience, like I never forget how grateful I am to have the life that I have. And I don't take my privilege for granted.
Yeah.
And I try as much as I can. And I think it was you that said something about making the world a better place.
Yes.
We should use everything we have to try to do that in whatever way we can. So whether that's donations, whether that's supporting candidates who believe in climate change, et cetera, and human equality, which are kind of my two big issues. It's those types of things to try to use what it is that we've been gifted with in this life to help others.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Thank
well,
you.
So from money memories ties into financial infidelities. Right. And that could be definably different for each person individually, whether that's something that you've experienced, from a business partner or that you have not been impeccable yourself with your own finances. What's a financial infidelity that you're both open to sharing that you either experienced or witnessed that you think others could learn from?
Can I hide behind my water mug so no one can see me?
No, in fact, I'm going to go off the screen so they could just...
Well, basically, it's so funny because I've never heard it called a financial infidelity.
You're cheating.
But I'm like horrified. I'm super sneaky in that I'm not really forthcoming about a lot. And I wouldn't say they're big. They're just it's like clothes and things that if I, and also a part of my personality. So I don't know, Jennifer, maybe you can tell me, is this financial infidelity? Does it come from financial scarcity, or is it just my personality that I just feel like parts of me don't feel like I was meant to be partnered? Because I have a really hard time checking in and consulting about every tiny little decision. I feel like I'm holding on to my freedom and independence in every little way. And so the thought of having to consult about wanting to get a new cute pair of glasses or a pair of shoes, I sort of ugh, I don't want to have to do that. But if my husband is saying okay, we're going into budget time, we call it Operation Cupboard clean out, to stop buying all this weird stuff at the grocery store, wear what you got. I have this immediate, I feel like he's stepping on my throat. I feel like I'm in prison. And I start getting really sneaky about like, I want this thing. We're fine. What's the worst that could happen? Of course, my dad, oh my God, he had the same exact personality as me. And he literally was like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, carpe diem. And he literally went bankrupt now that I'm thinking about it.
Oh, gosh.
Wait, did I mention that?
Jennifer, I think you and I need to double team an appointment for Talia and kind of dig into some of this stuff with you for a different day.
Okay, I want an answer.
You're like, I'm looking at my
Yeah.
fingers now.
I know. It's like I get a little sneaky about like, you can't tell me that I'm like, I work so hard. I deserve this thing. And I don't want to have to consult and you tell me, no, you're not my dad. I'm a terrible financial partner.
No. And you know what? Don't feel alone in that, because I've heard similar threads from other folks on this, and how some folks have made it work for their own personal situations is they've had that conversation saying, okay, what's the dollar amount definably where I have to check in? Or is there a dollar amount? Right? Like the gal who talked about her partner going out and buying a car and rolling up with this brand new BMW in the driveway, which was shared money, purchased it and didn't tell her. Well, that should be a conversation. Absolutely.
Sure, it should.
But you buying glasses, does that fall under that threshold where it needs to be a conversation with your spouse?
Doug is looking at me weird.
I would say, with those eyes that are laser beams, I will say, I think and my personal opinion is everything should be a conversation. So I love her husband. So I'm going to be talking with him this afternoon about the esteem that she has and what she's not doing.
He already knows. I
know that. I'm
out
joking.
myself.
I'm
And
joking.
He always is like, oh, is that new? And I'm like, very old. You just don't remember it.
That's a lie. I don't encourage anyone to lie.
No,
I
he
know.
knows. And he knows I get sneaky the second he says budget. I'm like, I need something immediately.
Well, and that might be something to look at, but I don't think you're doing anything hazardous. I don't.
I would say
I
that
know enough about you, and I know some other things on that list that you're not saying out loud, but I'm not going to bring them up.
Jerry, he knows too much.
I do know too much
Think
because
I'm
we
gonna have
talk
to-
every morning.
Sleep with one eye open.
And I will tell you, I mean, but it's interesting. It's kind of going along the lines of like, we never quite get through some of this stuff, and it's okay. Like, we get to be human beings in all of this, right? And for sure, and when I talk about infidelity, it's really not with anybody else in my life. It's me. And really, I'm just going to own this overcompensating again. Like, I probably had 15 credit cards at one point. I was going again to New York City, and where I was dating someone. I thought I was dating someone. I don't really know that I was. But I ended up spending a shitload of money, and then I would buy really, really nice clothes to try to impress people and whatnot. But that was my own insecurity at that time, and that was quite some time ago. But I was really trying very hard not to be the poor farm kid that had jeans that were too big, or I didn't have the popular Nike swoosh, the blue swoosh tennis shoes that I envied so much growing up. I didn't have those. And so I had the poor kid stuff from Shopko or Zayre Shopper City. And I look back at those times and I was so ashamed of that. And so I did everything I could. And that's too bad. Like, I wish I knew at that time that I didn't have anything to be ashamed of. And it was okay to kind of feel those things and that I could actually talk about them. But I hid. I did everything I could to hide how I grew up. And so as I've kind of overcompensated over the course of time, I just really fucked myself financially, excuse my language, over the course of time by overspending and making sure that I had the things that made me feel on the outside okay. I mean, we both know, all three of us know that that's not how you gain self-esteem. I was looking on the outside a way that I wanted to look, but on the inside, I still felt like that poor little kid, which, by the way, I will always kind of feel that way.
Yeah.
Like, every once in a while when someone is very kind about the podcast, or, I'm seeing somebody who's an incredibly impressive person as a client who has vetted me to be their therapist, I'm so humbled by the experience and I never forget who I am. But I can't forget who I am now either, because both are true. So.
Wow. That's so true. And again, beautifully said. You both have had so many fantastic nuggets in this conversation that I feel like should be on t-shirts.
Let's go into
merch
business.
ideas.
Let's share merchandise. That's good.
More merchandise. Yes.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for both sharing and being raw and vulnerable and just beautiful with your stories and your commitment to where you're at now. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
So as we start to wrap things up, one thing I like to ask is, what are tips and or tricks that you use to utilize money maybe differently in your own households?
You go.
I will go. I mean, it's very easy for me. And it's funny because I recently had some work done on I have ongoing work. I have a 1904 home, and I have an amazing buddy, Jeff, who is my contractor, and he just recently redid my bedroom. So we redid the floors, original wide plank pine flooring, painted it a beautiful new color. As I was putting my clothes back into my closet, I'm like, I have not even seen 5 pairs of my shoes. I will never wear them out for the rest of my life. And so I literally just did this very thoughtful. What I'm trying to be, in my tidbit or my tip would be thoughtful about what you have, what you want, what versus need, what you can afford. And so I found myself just really kind of, I'll be honest, disgusted by what I have purchased. And then I thought I could give all of these away. I gave a few shirts away to a buddy. I gave some clothes to my younger, who redesigns them in different fashion ways and rips them apart. And as I watched that Dolce & Gabbana shirt getting ripped apart, I'm like, let it go, Doug. It doesn't matter. It's just a thing, right? But I look at it, and my goal is now to be thoughtful about what do you have. And that goes for food. It goes for clothing. I am not somebody who wants to scrimp when it comes to hotels or accommodations or travel. So I decide where my money needs to go and what's important to me at this point. So really the word thoughtful is what I would say. Be thoughtful about what you have and what you need and what you want, and make decisions based on that. But it's taken me a long time to look. And when I saw 5 pairs of shoes I've never seen, like beautiful blue suede shoes that were probably $800, I'm like, oh, Doug, what did you do? Right. And I feel I'm very financially stable. Taxes are up to date, all that sort of thing. But, the reality is it's taken me a long time to kind of live in, I guess, in a stable way and a thoughtful way. Mm. So that's what I would say. Be thoughtful. Take a really honest look at your stuff.
I love that.
Thank you.
I was sort of changing all my answers as you were talking.
Were you?
So I needed those extra couple of minutes.
I'm glad to help out.
But I mean, I think that because there has been so much sort of like scarcity and fear and maybe like shame about spending money, secrecy, like you shouldn't, whatever you do spending money is bad. That I feel like what I am trying to instill, with the boys and in our family is that it's about like what you value. And so we really value good food and good wine and, the finer things. We value travel. We value education. And so if we are going to live in alignment with that value system, then there is, as long as we're within our means, there's no shame around spending money on those things that are really high values for us. And I also was thinking about, like, in terms of things that we are trying always so hard to, it's like Marie Kondo. Why is she coming up for us? Just like, let it spark joy. And if we're going to spend money on this item, let it spark joy. Let it have a place of honor. And if it doesn't, it's just a thing that's drowning you, and get rid of it.
I really love that comment, though, about Marie Kondo, because, of course, that's about having joy in your life. And I will tell you, the other thing I might say, and it's my tip for myself, is that I do splurge occasionally on something that just has a great deal of joy and meaning to me. Yes. So I recently bought a piece of art, as Talia knows, that is ridiculously expensive.
But
spectacular. And every time I look at it in this guy's studio, I started weeping. It was so meaningful to me. It haunted me for months. Thank you, Nick Harper. I know. So there's a part of me that is so grateful for this art. And I thought, and I looked at 3 pieces, and one was a couple thousand, one was close to 9,000. And I decided the one that was more expensive was the one I really wanted. And so I'm grateful for the things that give me joy. Mm-hmm. Every single day I will look at that art and have an emotional experience, what I'm really grateful for. So I bought the couch that I really like. It's outrageously expensive, but I like it, right? So I do buy only now as well what I really love and what makes me happy and comfortable.
And like a little tip, that I don't know, I'm sure everyone knows about these things, but nowadays, like, you're raising teenagers, there's this thing called Greenlight that just basically they can on their phones our boys see, like they get an allowance. It has nothing to do with their chores. It's just like their expectations are just to be like a functional and contributing member of the household. So they get their allowance and it gets split up into like the spending money, the saving, and the charity, which they get to like, I don't know, twice a year they get to decide where they want to give that money. But that's been really interesting and helpful for them to sort of learn how to value the different pieces. And then we have like if we have things like above and beyond that we need help with, I mean, usually we'll just like ask them, hey babe, can you help me, blah, blah, blah. And they always will. But then there are the annoying tasks that take time that we will, we'll pay them for. They want to make it
good.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. Well, thank you both so much. So many fantastic nuggets in our conversation today, and I appreciate it. Your time and just your sharing.
Jennifer, thank you so much for having us. And thank you again for being on our podcast as well. We were really grateful for your time as well.
Great. Well, thank you. And then hopefully those of you listening and watching will join us in the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.